people. We have 30 people total at the meeting so far. So Maria, you want to do your intro thing that we do, and then we'll take it from there?
Yes, I can try to do my intro thing. Sorry, I have some background noise. Everybody, can you give me 1 minute, okay? Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining. This is a meeting that we're having, a special meeting that we're having tonight. The intro that I need to give is that by the governor's executive order, we can have meetings online. If this is your first time, well, Joe, this is going to be a little different because this is a different kind of meeting. So
no, it's an actual meeting of the Housing Committee. We're going to have a panel and presentation first, followed by Q&A from the committee, and then Q&A from the public.
Oh, so we are going to do the same kind of run of show, which Joe just shared. And if you have any questions, I would ask that you raise your hand right now if you have any questions.
On how the operation or the meeting works.
Yes, thank you.
And here we are on Zoom.
Yeah, and there are no raised hands, no questions, which is great. I know I went through that really quickly, but
you did not do the phone thing, the *8, everything.
Oh, thank you, Joe. If you are calling in on the phone, but no one is calling in, but if someone does call in, you press *9 to raise your hand, *6 to unmute.
So first, let's do quick introductions. I'm Joe Restucci. I'm the co-chair of the Housing, Health, and Human Services Committee. Hector.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Hector Vasquez, a member of the Elliott-Chelsea Tenants Association and Community Board 4. I'm a Fulton resident.
Hi, Leslie Williams, member of the HHSS committee.
Judith.
Hey, everybody. Judith Dayhill, HHH committee member.
Pete.
Yes, HHS committee member.
Katie.
I am Katie Stokes. I'm also an HHS committee member.
James.
Cannot be here. You got to stay there. Go.
James. You're on mute.
It's got to be a first time for everything. James Wallace, Chelsea resident and committee member of HHHS.
Josephine.
Josephine Ishman, HHH committee member.
Paul. You're on mute.
Oops, yes. Anyway, Paul Ames, public member, HHHS.
Jessica.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Jessica Chait, member of HHHS and second vice chair of MCB4 and Chelsea resident.
Dolores.
Hi, Dolores Rubin, member of the committee.
So I just want to give the format for tonight was a little bit different. Tonight we are reviewing and considering and then having a decision on the report on the Chelsea NYCHA working group report, which was issued. We'll go through a panel who will present the summary of the findings in the report and then discuss what the next steps are. Afterward, we will take questions from the committee and then questions from the public. And then the committee will come to an agreement about a letter about the report. So we're going to start off the presentation, and there are a number of presenters here. We have Miguel Acevedo from the Fulton Tenant Association, Lenny Rosado from the Fulton Tenant Association, Hector Vasquez from Elliott-Chelsea and Fulton, Robert Atterbury from Congressmember Nadler's office, and Chris Nickel from State Senator Jackson's office. Along with myself, we will do their presentation, go through it, and then at the end, we'll have questions again from the committee and then from the public. So starting off, Nellie, can you put the presentation up? Is everyone, can you make it full screen?
I'm having a little technical difficulties at the moment, so I can't turn it full screen.
You can't turn it full screen. Is it
No,
a
not
way?
at the moment.
Let me see if I could share it. Okay. So you want to stop the share, and I'll start to share.
Okay, let me give you
Yeah,
permission.
give me permission.
Hold
Right.
on.
And then I can turn it back to you if you can make it thing work. Okay.
Since you're waiting, Joe, you forgot me on the list, Joe.
I'm sorry. And Mike Noble is one of our presenters. Nellie, can you bring over Betty, please?
I don't see Betty.
She just. One second. Nellie, did it come to you as a PDF? Is that the problem?
I just made you co-host.
Right. I don't have it as a PowerPoint. Hold on a second.
Joe, Savannah just sent you the PowerPoint, and also I sent Betty the link to the meeting.
Thank you, Loris. Yep, I got it. I can open it now. And I have it in full screen. Okay. Thanks everybody for waiting. You're right there with this. Can everybody see it? Yes?
Yeah.
It's populated? Okay. So tonight we are reviewing the findings from the Chelsea NYCHA Working Group report. The report was issued roughly 3.5 weeks ago. It is comprehensive. It's over 110 pages. And we will go through a summary for tonight. I've already given our agenda, and this is a series of proposed recommendations: resident rights and protections, capital finance, resident engagement, and then a discussion among the group, questions from committee members, questions from public members. We start out with the fact that there's a capital need of NYCHA of roughly $40 billion. We have seen this image before, $40 billion, and federal funding is only $3.7 billion. And that's one of the reasons the city of New York, and certainly the tenants in the Chelsea NYCHA developments, came together to devise an alternate plan to come up with funding for capital renovations. And capital renovations are not just repairs. There are things like replacement of heating systems, replacement of plumbing systems. If we look at the Chelsea NYCHA buildings, the capital need is roughly $366 million. The majority of work will be spent on apartments, kitchens, bathrooms, floors, sheetrocking, new bathrooms and new kitchens, not just repairs. $108 million on the exterior work, masonry work, roofing, windows, areas that need to be entirely redone. And then the thing that drives the tenants the most difficult are systems, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing that are in very bad condition in these buildings. A small piece of it for work on the actual site, meaning the playgrounds, the entries, the walkways. And most important, additional heating. As part of this work, the working group decided to include all new heating systems, not only new boilers, but actually new distribution of piping and convectors throughout the entire complex. And built in is inflation, because by the time this thing happens, it will become more expensive. Going to Robert Atterbury.
Hi. So one of the things we want to make sure everyone remembers is sort of where this all started. Back in 2019, was it? Oh my God, a very long time ago. The city put out its own plan, and it basically just threw it out there in the world that involved demolition and the reconstruction of a bunch of buildings on there, and would have cost a lot of folks, forced them to move to different elsewhere to other units in the development. It would, and what happened was we got a really robust response from sort of all quarters, particularly residents at Fulton, but the larger community as well. And so what we tried to do is we came up with a process to really actually bring all stakeholders to the table to put the city's plan aside and really start from the beginning and have a meaningful conversation to make sure that all folks and all stakeholders really understood the options that were available, what was on the table, what was possible, what wasn't, what was necessary, and down the road. And so we worked really hard to make sure that we had a really wide ranging group of different perspectives and different voices. So we had, importantly, residents from both Fulton and Elliott-Chelsea. And in this, we made sure that we had both folks from the TA. We also had and made sure we included some of the folks who were most vocal in their concerns who were not necessarily on the TA also, to really try to make sure that we had a broad spectrum of resident opinions on the group. We included the local community board, particularly this includes some land use actions, all the local elected officials, from the mayor to the public advocate to the comptroller, member of Congress, 2 state senators, an assembly member, and a city council member, as well as a bunch of housing advocates and academics and people who study these issues, to make sure that we had a robust understanding of all the options and could really think creatively. City Hall, so again, the mayor's office, and then all the right folks from NYCHA itself. And I will say, in these conversations, it really is really important to have the right folks from the agency and the mayor's office at the table with us, negotiating directly with residents, in order to convince people that they need to change a plan or move something on. And you really need to also be working with the folks who have to enact it, because NYCHA itself really needed to believe at the end of this process that they had what we were asking them to do was something that was in their capability to do, and that they could really move forward on. And so I think it worked really well to really bring everyone there so that residents could bring their concerns directly to NYCHA and the agencies, and we could help be at the table to help make sure we're facilitating a real response and engagement around those concerns. And I think on the next slide.
Yes, but just to note, as for members, we also have the Deputy Mayor, Vicky Bean, attending, and the Chair of the Housing Authority, Greg Russ. So we really brought decision makers into the room with tenants for the first time, pretty much ever in my memory.
Yeah, which is really amazing, particularly when they did choose to override the people below them. Within the working group, we really wanted to make sure that we were starting not with a blank slate, but by putting residents' interests first. And if you ever talk to any residents here, one of the things that you will hear, the 2 things that you hear the absolute most of, people are desperate for repairs, and I don't think anyone can do that. And 2, people are very afraid that any changes down the road to any of the programs will cost them their homes. And we really needed to make sure that the working group focused on solving both of those issues and making sure that we understood and that residents understood all of the things, so that the residents were able to really make decisions for themselves and guide the rest of the group. And so for this, we started with identifying the needs and the priorities. We went really broad spectrum on all possible revenue strategies. Anything that could bring in money was on the table and then got taken off the table. So things like demo got dumped quick, but we started with an open mind. And then we developed recommendations to really make sure that we understood how to fund all the repairs, and importantly, what those repairs were, because what NYCHA thought was necessary repairs, what residents thought were the necessary repairs were not the same, which was really good thing that we were able to really flesh out. That we went line by line through the leases and everything else about protecting resident rights, every possible concern. We chased down other old court cases. We chased down the legal documents to make sure that we understood and had a full spectrum on the resident protections, how to preserve their rights, and how to frankly enhance them. And then also importantly, how to make sure that there was ongoing resident engagement with a plan moving forward, because it's not good enough to do some putting here, but now you have to move into an implementation stage that really takes a lot more and needs a much more robust conversation. And I don't think anyone could claim that NYCHA was some paragon of resident engagement before this either. So we wanted to make sure we were using this as an opportunity to change that for the long term.
Going on to engagement, Chris.
Hi, folks. My name is Chris. You can use they, them pronouns with me. I work with Senator Robert Jackson, which is a name you may not be super familiar with because we represent only about 30% of CB4, and we represent the north side of 26th Street at Elliott-Chelsea houses. So we did play a role in this plan. I was co-chair of the Resident Engagement Subcommittee, which is what we're talking about right now on this slide. So in the two sort of rounds of engagement that we were able to do, one was pre-pandemic and one was during. The first round were 2 engagement sessions that we held November 20th and 21st, right before the Thanksgiving holiday in November of 2019. And there were about 228 folks who came out, 135 NYCHA residents, a bunch of community residents. I participated in those workshops. They were basically designed to capture what the biggest issues were for residents that they wanted to see fixed, and what were the sort of lines in the sand as to the things they would be willing to compromise on if we got to that point. So it was really informing our process going forward. At that point, we were in the middle of discussing all the revenue strategies and really sussing out what was possible and what was not. And so this information fed directly into our conversations as a working group about how we wanted to be faithful to what the residents said they prioritized. In December of this past year, we held a sort of blitz of sessions virtually, and we really pulled out all the stops to try and make sure that we got as many people on there as possible. And as you can see here, there were over 270 NYCHA residents who participated. We as a working group, I think we were all very well aware that this number is low for the final review of a plan like this that is as comprehensive as this is. But I will say from the perspective of our subcommittee, we did almost everything we could think of under the sun to make these engagement sessions, to really drive turnout at these engagement sessions, and then to make it accessible once people got there. The road show that you're seeing tonight is running as smoothly as it is without any prep on our part, because we got so good at talking about the plan during these 6 engagement sessions that we had in December. And people responded in kind. A lot of the residents who hadn't participated at all in the process before came up with very insightful questions that are going to inform the process going forward. And that was because we made the information accessible. So we don't pretend to have gotten a comprehensive survey of the residents through that engagement session, but the information we did get was very helpful, and the information that the residents got in return, we think was also very useful going forward. So we're building an understanding base among the residents, even during the pandemic.
So during this, we learned and heard a lot. Miguel.
Hi, I'm Miguel Acevedo, TA President at Robert Fulton Houses. Good evening, everyone. So multiple options was required because, for example, the first thing that we were told, they were going to demolish 2 buildings. And they put a lot of fear in the residents here at Fulton Houses because they thought they were going to be displaced and sent to another borough because of displacement. Doing nothing was definitely not a choice, because if we would have stood quiet, what happened in the past with the Housing Authority is that they came up with plans, they're going to do rad pack deals, and residents felt they wasn't involved in the conversation. So we made sure that we did something, not nothing. And resident driven, I have never seen something so resident driven, because as much as we had such a large group that involved everyone from not-for-profits, from Community Board 4, City Hall, the chair of NYCHA, they listened to the residents. Everything that came out of this, mostly from the residents driving the process to make sure that we were heard. And I can guarantee you, you can go to many other developments and they'll tell you that it was never resident driven, not even resident conversations that took place during any of their RFP proposals in the past. And then talking about the funding strategies that we took the trade-offs, like for example, because of infill, we may lose a park, but it gives an opportunity for a building to bring more affordable housing to Fulton houses. So we understand the trade-offs. We may have to relocate other areas within the development, lose some parking that's not parking that's going to really affect the residents, but commercial buildings may go up there where we may benefit in the end also. Then we had other strategies for the funding, the capital repairs. Believe me, we need the capital repairs here at Fulton Houses. Literally, in my building alone, the elevator has been out in the last 2 months more than 60 times. You know, just the other day, I have residents who had to carry luggage over a sleeping homeless person on the 3rd floor, and they had to go to the 6th floor. This is something we should not be dealing with. Just this past weekend, thank God it wasn't as cold, there was no heat in some of the buildings. And then we got a building that has no gas for over a month and a half. To make matters worse, they lost their heat and hot water last weekend, and it took NYCHA 4 days just to fix a simple valve to get them their heat and hot water. With their gas going off, it was, you know, crazy for me because I got calls almost 24 hours a day. So then the no demolition part is, like I said earlier, people were really afraid of losing their homes through this demolition. And thank God, because we worked together as a good working group to make sure that demolition was taken off the table. The other thing that I want to discuss is long-term affordability. Like I said, it's going to stay 30%. We're going to build more affordable housing here at Fulton Houses, and there's going to be no demolition. And one of the issues we do have here is safety and security, because for some reason or another, our doors are broken simply almost every day. We do have a homeless situation going on at Fulton Houses. I understand that they feel safe and secure at Fulton Houses, but at the same time, it's putting fear in the residents who don't come out because they see homeless individuals in our development. Now, next, we have the capital finance strategies, resident engagement, and tenant protections. All 3 of this is what made this happen. Without this way, I can guarantee you, we would have not supported this. But this was all about all of us to make sure that Fulton Houses will be around in Elliott-Chelsea for the next century. And I want to say, it not for this committee, you can believe me, you can go to Wise Towers, you can go to Brooklyn, the Bronx, they'll tell you nothing like this has ever happened, the way this working group subcommittees worked. And NYCHA is looking to use this plan for their future blueprint plans. That's how good we did. Thank you, everyone.
We're going to go to Lenny, talk about tenant protections.
How you doing? My name's Lenny Rosado. I'm President Fulton and resident. I'm also a TA Vice President of the Fulton Community Association. We worked really hard with the resident rights protection just to ensure that our residents, were really looked after. And one of the things that we worked on was to seek to implement a rent cap, which was set at the contract rent for all units that were converted through the PAC program to prevent higher income residents from paying above market rents, and to reduce increased market rents, and to reduce increased risk of eviction and displacement. Another thing we did was to modify the lease to ensure tenants have the same or greater rights when it comes to eviction and preservation of the subsidy. One of the The third thing we did was to ensure residents do not face additional expenses as part of the PAC conversion, which includes late fees or higher fees for appliances like air conditioning, washing machine, pets, and so on. Another fourth thing that we did was to engage residents in shaping the house rules during and after the PAC conversion. Another thing that we did was to limit additional credit background checks, including prohibiting PAC property manager from doing any additional tenant screenings. Another we did was require meaningful tenant engagement regarding future proposed lease changes and safety and security, utility charges, rules, and governing senior building destinations, pets, and apartment improvements. Another thing we did was to ensure that full NYCHA tenant participation activity funds were provided to both Elliott-Chelsea and Fulton resident associations after the PAC conversion. Now
Thank you,
going back
Lenny.
to Joe.
So our biggest difficult part was capital finance strategy. We had to fully fund $366 million in repairs. Then we also sought to expand affordable housing on the campuses, but expand that in a way that respected the neighborhood context. NYCHA proposed at one point, for example, why can't we do a bunch of 45-story towers on parking lots? So we shot them down immediately. We also know that we need to respond to improve tenant amenities, both the open space, Huts and Guild, specifically, what is there that the tenants need? How can this plan also deliver that? The plan needs to deliver and create some local jobs. So not only in construction, but also in building operation going forward. And we made clear as part of the discussion of capital finance that any bit of funding would be subject to the tenant's rights and the ongoing tenant engagement, that they were not separate. You looked at the $366 million for the capital need on the left, and we put together a package of Rental Assistance Demonstration Program, RAD, PACT in New York. That is basically the ability when the projects are leased, when the buildings are leased to a private entity and a Section 8 and it converts to Section 8, there's now an ability to put a mortgage on the buildings. So in plain language, this means that in total, between mortgage and investment on the Elliott-Chelsea and the Fulton buildings, $263 million can be raised for capital improvements. $81 million in constructing new buildings on vacant lots. Those buildings will be 50% affordable and 50% market. Retail retrofit means the ground floor on Fulton and the Children's Center on 25th and 10th. Convert those to commercial space and create more income, capital income for this development. There's a city capital allocation of roughly $8 million that will be rolled over into this project. Another $5 million raised by, as Miguel noted, building 1- and 2-story buildings on parking lots. We are not losing one parking space in this development, either in Fulton or in Elliott-Chelsea, but we are moving them around and reallocating them. And the last piece is the West Chelsea Affordable Housing Fund, roughly $1 million available. We hope to be more available in the future. Those together brought us to $366 million. We looked at various locations to do new infill buildings. In purple, you're at the Fulton campus, 9th Avenue on your right, 10th Avenue on your left. The purple are locations for specifically new buildings that are the same height and adjacency to existing Fulton buildings. 50% affordable, 50% market rate. The ground floor, the yellow are 1- and 2-story commercial community facility buildings. They could be buildings like doctor's offices or ground floor retail. And then along 9th Avenue, both in the yellow and in the turquoise, that's D, E, and F, is the conversion of the ground floor space currently used for storage or workshops into commercial space, which has a great deal of value in Chelsea. That will also mean we'll have to take the basketball court between 18th and 19th, slide it about 100 feet to the west in order to accommodate that. That work would have to happen prior to the commercial space being built. Next on Elliott-Chelsea, we went through a process and realized the Fulton sites were not enough. They did not bring in enough funds to get the capital plan done. We found 2 locations in Elliott-Chelsea, one in the purple labeled EC2 by 9th Avenue. That's the current location of the garbage dumpsters on the south side of West 26th Street, and built a building in that odd shape in order to maximize the square footage that could be built. It still was not enough, and it meant we needed to come up with one more site, EC1. That is the site of the current Hudson Guild, so we came up with a plan which involved not only a demolition of part of the existing Guild building, but in yellow, a building of a new Hudson Guild of 1 to 2 stories. And as the plan progressed, we were able to actually have this building entirely funded by the private development. So there will be a new Hudson Guild built as part of this plan. And then H is the Children's Center on 26th and 10th. That building also extends into the ground floor of the Elliott building, immediately to the east. And that is very difficult because it is not meeting today's standards and compliance for early childhood learning. That will be renovated and used as commercial space instead. In doing the new construction, building 348 units of market rate and 348 units of low, moderate, middle income apartments, that creates $81 million toward the preservation of the existing 2,071 low-income units. A very important part here, as Miguel noted, about the trade-offs and the strategies. So instead of doing a few very large buildings with all market rate units, every building is 50-50. Many of the projects or developments proposed by NYCHA originally were either 80-20 or 70-30. So we've gotten many more affordable units as part of this development. Chris and Hector.
Hey, so we've covered the resident rights portion of the work that we've done. We've covered the resident in the capital finance portion, and now we're going to talk about the resident engagement portion, which is the subcommittee that Miguel and I co-chaired, and that Hector served on among other people. So the basic principles that we laid out that informed the 6 or 7 buckets of recommendations that we made that Hector's going to talk about are here for you on the slide. These recommendations that we made are a baseline for engagement, not a ceiling. They're the floor. So they're the bare minimum that we expect NYCHA and the city to follow through with in the process that we're laying out here. But we expect them to go beyond this if possible, when possible. Another one of our principles is that the resident associations, the democratically elected leadership of these TAs, should collaborate to guide NYCHA on the rehabilitation process. And that word collaborate is not an empty one here. Our recommendations sought to give teeth to the resident associations in a way that has not happened yet. And I think we were able to do so in the final report, and we can talk more about that later. Also recognizing that there's a wealth of resources within the Chelsea community already. Invite community board representatives like yourselves, local CBOs, and other key stakeholders to the milestone meetings so that you can also provide accountability checks during this process and say if something seems to be going off the rails and help get it back on track for the residents. And so one of the other things is that along the way, this bullet point, the second to last, will make more sense when Hector speaks, but every step of the way, affirm what is required by the residents, affirm what is preferred by the residents, and affirm what is negotiable by the residents. They should be able to say which bucket each element fits into as the rehabilitation process goes forward. And the last is just to standardize communication and transparency. This sounds really wonky, but it basically results in something like what we did in December, where on every call there were Spanish interpreters, there were Russian interpreters, there were Cantonese interpreters, and there were Mandarin interpreters. And those are the 4 most commonly spoken languages other than English in these developments. And so that's an example of what we expect NYCHA and the city to continue doing throughout the rehabilitation process to make sure that the residents receive ample, clear, and full information as early as possible so that they can plan and provide their input and that it's taken seriously. So I'll turn it over to Hector, who's going to talk about the actual nuts and bolts of our 6, I believe there's 6 buckets of recommendations that we made.
Hey, Chris, thank you very much. Again, my name is Hector Vasquez. I'm a longtime resident of Elliott-Chelsea houses and just recently moved to Fulton houses. So I have a lot of experience in both developments and pretty much seen it all. I'm here to explain to you a little bit about resident engagement and the recommendations we came up with. For those who are not familiar with for requests for proposals, which is RFPs, basically it's a set of guidelines that we put out to developers, which is basically the requests that we have and the requirements that we need in order for us to get these developments back for fully repaired and up to speed and modernized, and make it more livable and safe for everybody here. Anyway, so we're looking at the request for proposal, which is the RFP. And the first one we are looking at is train and include RAs in drafting RFPs. Before I joined the work group, I didn't even know what RFP was, just like maybe a lot of other folks out there. And it's been a long learning process. And basically, we've had a lot of training sessions on this, and we formed a committee to basically come up with a good plan moving forward on this. Well, another requirement that we're looking at is nonprofit partners on development team, which was a must because we felt that nonprofits had a better stake in a lot of this, not just a financial one. And that was much needed to make this whole process work. We also looked at prioritizing when we're looking at these developers. We're not just going to take anybody. We're going to look at their backgrounds and investigate them fully to the best of our abilities and see what kind of work they've done in the past, a good record of property management. We want to see that they maintain local partnerships, meaning that when they move into a community, they become a part of a community. They don't go there to run things and then go home at the end of the day and forget about everybody. That they actually have a stake in the community, and they actually, we all benefit from that. We also looked at providing job training and employment opportunities for our local residents, which in this time of COVID, a lot of people have lost their jobs, a lot of families are suffering. So we took this opportunity to work this in to try to benefit our residents here, to improve their lives, not just their living accommodations, but also maybe come up with a career out of this and a job to be able to bring money home and support their families. We thought that was important. We were also looking at MWBEs because we felt this would benefit a lot of folks of minority, especially women-run businesses, which was lacking in this day and age, and we're working toward a better tomorrow. So we felt that we needed to work that in to this plan. Also, resident association engagement and the evaluation is key here. They're also involved in the selection of development team as well, because basically without the resident engagement, which is also your tenants association, who better to know what's needed here and what needs to be accomplished, and to be able to interact, to be your go-between between the residents and the developers. Also, we're looking at pre-development plans, which we include safety and security planning and discussion of house rules and pet policies, which we hashed this out back and forth for quite a while now. We know about all the security concerns and the safety concerns and all the house rules that have been neglected in the past and ignored. Well, we wanted to make some ironclad rules and regulations that would work to our benefit for once, since we had a seat at the table and we were able to voice our opinions and make sure moving forward that our best interests were met. Also, the next phase was for the resident engagement recommendations was design. We as residents want to know what our households are going to be in the future. We don't just want to move into some cookie cutter home that somebody put together and forced upon us. So that's why it was really important that the residents had a say in what goes into the apartments. meaning basically there'll be several models put out possibly, and we'll narrow them down to the best ones and the most quality work that we can get from these developers in partnership. And basically, we're going to present that to the residents, and you, the residents, will get to pick and choose from a selection. You know, what kind of sinks you get in there, what kind of stoves, flooring, that sort of thing. And we're not talking about just cosmetic stuff. We're talking about stuff behind the walls, electrical, piping, all that's going to be redone. We wanted to also make sure we share design mock-ups and gather resident feedback. As I said earlier, your input everybody's input is important here. I'm a resident, and I know for a fact that I got frustrated many times when you spoke to management or someone in charge and they don't want to listen to you and they just blow you off. Well, it's a different scenario now. We have a seat at the table and we've been able to voice our concerns, and your feedback is really needed and warranted. Construction moving forward. We wanted to make sure we would avoid relocation whenever possible. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you and tell you that, hey, you get to stay in your home and there won't be any kind of issues. Obviously, on a redevelopment of this massive scale, there will be situations where there will maybe some removal of some items that is detrimental to your health, and we may have to ask you to move temporarily, or maybe some kind of special accommodations can be made within your apartment whenever possible to make sure you're safe in your home doing these renovations, because we don't want any issues or you having any headaches over this. We want to minimize this as much as possible. We want to share clear information upfront about any necessary or temporary relocations. We want to ensure construction safety and security planning to minimize quality of life impacts. Okay, and we also want to make sure moving and beyond. So we're not just talking about pre-planning, we're not talking about doing construction. We want to make sure that there were ongoing partnerships between the RAs, management, and NYCHA continue and prosper. We all want to make sure that after the construction is done and you get to move into your nice new development again in your apartment and you're back in there, or if you stay there during the construction, that you're happy with what you have. And then if there's any ongoing issues or anything comes up, management is responsive to your needs. And we all know how that goes. I mean, right now, it takes a while for anybody to get any response from NYCHA to get anything fixed, as Miguel had mentioned earlier, with all the issues going on in Fulton and Elliott-Chelsea. All right, if
we're going to go to Mike next, but I want to note
Yes.
for Mike about next steps that we're ready at 7:17. So keep it very tight when we go through it. I want to make sure there's enough time for questions by committee and public. Okay, Mike Noble.
Very good, thanks, Joe. My name's Mike Noble. I've lived at in the Elliott houses now for almost 20 years with my son. So I speak from experience when I talk about NYCHA. I'm also the co-secretary of CB4, the land use committee there. And I've obviously worked with the working group, been a member of that group, but now we're moving on. This is the next step. The working group recommendations are in place, they've been published, and we take it now to reality. What do we do with them? Next slide. What we're going to do first is have a couple of resident engagement meetings next month. And at that meeting, the first one, we're going to talk about the RFP process. What is it? Who our pact partners are? How long will it take to select these partners? And will residents be involved in the selection process? Next. Well, these are the stakeholders as we see them. And this is traditional. All the PACT programs that NYCHA has done, and there's been about 8 of them in every borough except Staten Island thus far. That involved about 9,500 units, okay? But in none of these projects have ever there been the kind of engagement by tenants, seeing it right from the beginning to the end, like we've had here. This is unique. It is something to be proud of, and hopefully it'll be a model for other projects. In any event, the PAC stakeholders go back.
Sorry.
Yep. So these are the stakeholders. And you see that NYCHA is one of them, obviously, the residents, and the contractors, social service people, the property managers. So these are the people who have an interest in getting this project done. Next. And the way it's done is through starting with an RFP, like you just heard. We are now at that stage where we're drafting this RFP. And I'm a member of a subcommittee, as is Hector and Miguel and a few others. A smaller group, much smaller than the working group. And what the RFP does, as you've heard, it asks for partnerships from private and nonprofit developers. And during this process, NYCHA helps to select, who the best people are, right, to manage and to get the construction done. This is the unique part. Resident leadership from Elliott-Chelsea and the Fulton houses will help write the RFP and participate in the selection process. That's where we are right now. We've had a number of meetings over the last couple of months, and we're pretty far along. Next slide. These are the steps, right? We're in step 1. We're trying to get this thing done by the end of next month and have it released. The project proposal review is step 2 in that timeline. And after all these proposals are presented to NYCHA, right? NYCHA will work with the resident leadership again to evaluate the proposals. This is unique. It's never been done before. So a small group of finalists will be chosen then. And then we go on to step 4, where the final candidates are interviewed, right? So again, the residents are involved in this. We're going to interview these candidates as well, then pick the best partners. Okay, that's step 5. We get the partners on board and engaged with the residents. Next slide. This is the timeline. And you can see on the left, the blue line is where NYCHA has been engaging with residents and will be engaging with residents. The far line on the right will be, where the resident, where the PAC partner actually engages with residents. And all of this has started, just recently. We're going to go through the proposals coming through to, say, in the summer, right? And then we'll move on to finally to the fall, where we select a partner. Then we continue on. Next slide. The next slide. So there it is, broken down a bit more. And as you can see, in these first three blocks, you're going to see resident engagement meetings. Okay, the first one is happening next month. In the summer, after we've gotten the review committee selected and we've had meetings and everything, we're going to have another meeting with residents. And in the fall, we're going to review the proposals and work with residents again and have another meeting. This goes on until 2022 through 2023, when we introduce the development partners to residents. The properties are then converted to Section 8, project-based Section 8 as it is, and the new manager assumes responsibility. Repairs begin. So that's basically where we are. There's a way to go, but I have faith that we're going to get this RFP out at the end of next month, and it's going to have a lot more in it, as a matter of fact, and we've already gotten in the recommendations from the working group report. Okay, this process that we've been engaged in has led to a lot more discussion, so it's been a continuing process. And as Hector and Lenny can tell you, we've added more, I think. Miguel as well, we've added a lot more. So that's where we are.
So what I'd like to note to sum this whole presentation up, and thank everybody for listening, is that we are talking about the full renovation of 2,071 low-income units in the Chelsea NYCHA developments in Elliott-Chelsea, Elliott-Chelsea Addition, and Fulton, and the construction of 696 new apartments, half of which will be affordable, and they're all permanently affordable. So this is a very large, ambitious project. It is driven by the tenants, it is driven by the resident associations, and certainly by the community and its elected officials. This report is very complex. This is merely a summary we saw today. Members of the committee have seen it. It's published on the board's website. And we'd like to start out this next section of the meeting by taking questions from committee members. So if you can, committee members, raise your hand one at a time for questions. Not one committee member. Oh, there we go. Okay. James.
Hi, yeah, I was just curious. This is an amazing plan. The amount of work is unfathomable. Thank you. I was just curious, very simple question about the basketball courts that were moved. I couldn't really tell where the access was. Can you sort of just describe that?
The basketball court is currently accessed both from the 9th Avenue side and from within the development. So imagine for a moment that rectangle merely slides about 100 feet west. You will still be able to access it from the pathways and the entries in the development.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Joe, may I add to something to that?
Please.
One of the reasons, James, that's being moved is to create small business on the avenue at Fulton houses. If you go from 14th Street as much north as you want to go, Fulton houses happens to be the only place that there is no businesses on the avenue.
Totally makes sense. Thank you.
Go ahead, Katie.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I think it's extraordinary how much work has been done, and I can see how committed people are to being involved in the rest of the work. I had a couple of questions. Number one, it's a small question. Joe, you mentioned that the child care place located at H, I think it was on the map.
Yes.
That retail space is going to be put there. I was just wondering, and what is happening to the childcare?
Oh, this portion of the project is done in phases. So first, the new Hudson Guild will get built, the new building, which is fronting. Imagine when you walk to the Guild now, you walk in through that entry, like the entry courtyard.
Yeah.
Instead, at that location will be a 2-story Hudson Guild. The new facility gets built first, and then the various parts of the old facility move the program into the new facility. So it's purpose built. So there's no break in the services.
Okay. All right. Just one. Great. Thank you. And I had a question. So 2 more questions real quickly. One was about the valuation of the retail space, because I think obviously people are counting on money coming in for the new retail space that will be made. But I also know that we're all well aware that there's a lot of empty retail space. So I was just wondering at what time were the valuation estimates made that now people are incorporating into this? Is it fairly recent, or was it 2 years ago?
No, so both for the retail space and for the commercial or office facility space, it's all post-COVID, it's all during COVID. So everything was adjusted way down. Very conservative numbers, and working with NYCHA to make sure that if it does better, the whole development does better. But right now, very conservative numbers on purpose.
Great. And actually, I forgot my third question, so never mind. Thanks.
Josephine?
Sorry about that. Just a quick, I agree with everyone. Congratulations for all the work you put into this. Just a quick question on community engagement. I think it was said earlier that the numbers weren't where you would like it to be. So are there any efforts being made? First of all, I guess the question is about what's the percentage of residents do you feel that have engaged in this? And then are there any efforts being made to engage more residents?
Chris and Miguel.
Yeah, I can take a stab, and Miguel, if you want to follow up. I believe that there are 1,000. Are there 1,500 at Elliott-Chelsea.
950.
Huh?
Yep.
Yeah.
950 at Fulton.
Yeah, so it's about 2,500 total. So I think we're probably at about having engaged between 10 and 20% of residents, understanding that not all residents are, adults even, but just to rough it on back of the envelope. I think the opportunities for engagement going forward are going to be crucial. We're actually in conversation with City Hall and with NYCHA about the meeting that they are going to have, I believe, April 13th and 14th with the residents. And our big push there is basically, listen, it can't just be the packed rad spiel. It has to be that plus the working group, plus we have a dense enough knowledge base among the residents of these developments by now that they deserve to know what an RFP is, and they deserve to have a sense of how the way that an RFP is structured affects the outcome of the project and the bid there. And so, we are saying you need to talk about that, and you need to leave space for what the residents' priorities are that might be able to be incorporated into that RFP. That's the stage that's the nearest in view, but we design the recommendations to make sure that at every stage of the process, from the drafting of the RFP, through the evaluation, through the design and construction, that there is input like that at every stage. So we expect that number of engaged residents to grow if NYCHA and City Hall hold up their end of the deal here and continue to do this wide-based engagement.
Yeah, let me step in there for a second, Chris, and tell you that that first slide that you saw was on the top page of one document that was sent out to all the residents at NYCHA over the last few days. All right, so they got a letter describing what we had in mind. They got that document that you saw much of in the slides here, and then another document, which is all the slides that will be presented at those meetings. A little bit more detailed, a lot more information about what the tenant rights and responsibilities are, the whole thing. There's a lot there that we haven't been able to share because, as you know, the RFP's got to remain confidential, right, from the public until it's released to the public. But I can assure you, the reason why that meeting is being held when it is so that there will be input from the residents, and it'll get into the RFP before we let it go in the next couple of weeks after that. Okay,
Miguel.
Okay, thanks.
Miguel next.
So, Chris, one of the things I want to say how grateful we are, as Chris mentioned earlier, his boss represents 30% of this whole development. Literally, if you listen to what Chris wanted so much for the resident engagement, you would think Chris actually and his boss lives in one of these developments. That's how much they wanted resident engagement to be first and foremost of this process. Every single attempt was made, not only from the RAs, but from the community board, from the elected officials, and from NYCHA to make sure the opportunity was given and is given in the near future for residents to participate in everything of this. So no one can literally say that they wasn't told. At my last tenant association meeting, that was some of the concerns that the residents said that they wasn't involved. To be honest with you, it's not true. It is posted where it needs to be posted. It is delivered where it needs to be delivered. We even got tablets that were delivered to residents who couldn't afford tablets or didn't have the opportunity to go on virtually, that NYCHA hand delivered themselves to the developments to make sure we having due process and fair process. And like I said earlier, in many RFPs and many NYCHA RAD impacts, residents had no voices. This process is a voice first and foremost coming from the residents, not only the RAs. Many times residents feel it's I who speaks only. Not true. This time, everybody had the opportunity. So we're going to continue to make sure that NYCHA plays its role. I will play my role. My board will play the role. Darlene plays her role. Everybody's making sure that every single resident is heard and has the opportunity to say what they want to say.
Thank you,
Going
Miguel.
back to-
And I just want to maybe suggest that, especially for the seniors, this is a very long document. It is kind of scary. So much to understand, a lot of new language. So, maybe you can do some sort of call out, especially to the seniors, like actually call them on the phone and let them know what's going on and how they can engage, just like we did with the senior meals, Miguel. Something similar to that, just to make sure that they know what's going on. Thank you so much.
If you don't mind me piping in on this, we actually did something similar to that prior to the Zoom meetings, where we had phone banks calling residents. So it's not something we didn't do, but again, it's just a matter of having people understand the process, and we are trying everything possible to make sure everybody understands what's going on and getting feedback from them.
And understand
So it
the
has-
whole process is handicapped because of COVID. The normal meetings we would have just can't happen. Judith, you're next.
Thank you. And I'm very proud of all the work that everyone's doing and that I can see a lot of engagement. I was going to ask a question that Katie asked, so I'm glad that we got an answer to that, but I'm going to ask a question I think James would have asked, but the theater and the art, I didn't see any place where the theater, because I've been to that theater for many productions, and I don't know, I didn't hear you say where the theater was going, and hopefully you'll be able to think about or incorporate art within the new establishment. But I really think you guys have gone way above the call of duty. You're doing a great job, and I really appreciate it.
The Hudson Guild Theater will be built into the new facility. We're not going to lose that theater because it is used heavily by the community, various sectors of the community. And in general, there will be public art built into this because that happens in these kind of projects. But although we have to advocate for it always. And as James knows, you have to ask, otherwise you don't get it. Leslie Williams is next.
Hi, phenomenal work by all, incredible work. Just a question, because of the transition from Section 9 to 8, are we considering all the safeguards to protect people who may not be documented?
Yes, you can speak to that. Robert?
Hi. So the eligibility is essentially the same. My understanding, I think you do have to be a citizen or documented in order to be eligible for either Section 8 or Section 9. And particularly in Section 9, you are not allowed to have additional family members. So a lot of folks, even if they are eligible to be added to the lease, do not get added to the lease and essentially don't count as part of the household because they're ineligible. After you make the jump from Section 9 to Section 8, you do have the ability to add people to your household, even if they would put you for what's known as underhoused, or there'd be too many people for your assigned unit size. So there's actually a good chance that we're going to be able to get a bunch of people who are currently living illegally or sort of without it within the development or contrary to the rules, living contrary to the rules in there, unregistered, actually on the leases and verified as newly verified residents.
Thank you.
Dolores?
I just wanted to state that I'm very happy to hear from all of the residents that have been part of the working group, because there's been a lot of static, a lot of noise about folks may have not have been represented, et cetera. But I'm clearly hearing from people very engaged that live in these buildings. I can't speak to it. I don't live in Chelsea. So I'm very excited to hear that this input is ongoing. I did hear briefly in the presentation a talk of this could be a model for the rest of RAD. Clearly, RAD itself has sparked a lot of fear just because people don't understand it. I'm wondering whether or not there's also the thought of providing a campaign, so to speak, to really show how RAD can be done where it is working with the community, working with the residents to bring about state-of-the-art changes to the housing that we had built so many years ago.
That's in the works, Dolores. It's been discussed at length lately because of the outcry that we've heard from people, especially those who don't even live in NYCHA. So we're thinking about it. I'm pushing the folks at NYCHA to do this, and it's definitely on the agenda. right? Much more sales, much more instruction, you know? And that's really what it is. It's getting people to understand a little bit better, and the fears go away. Once you know what you're dealing with, the fears go away. But I tell you, it's a big deal now. This promotion idea is a big thought, okay?
Joe, may I add to that? So Dolores, one of the things is the biggest fear with Rad Pack is the private partnership that's created. Many of the residents in other public housing conversions felt that privatizing was a form of elimination of public housing. And what we need to educate them, it's not the elimination, it's a partnership to create real funding to preserve public housing. And that's what the conversation really needs to be said.
So we should note in general, the NYCHA will continue to own the land and the buildings, and they will lease those buildings to the new private partnership, private for-profit, not-for-profit partnership, which means that NYCHA having a regulatory agreement as part of that lease can enforce anything that needs to be enforced. If the developers don't perform, if they don't finish on time, if they don't follow and are engaged with the tenants, if the rights in the leases are not enforced or they're looked the other way, NYCHA has the ability to step in and to rectify. That's a very important thing for all of us as we went through this process. I'm going to go next.
And
are there any other? Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'd like to add one more thing, Joe. I think it's important to sort of put into perspective that I don't think anybody in the working group who was not necessarily a part of NYCHA or City Hall already from the outset was supportive of RAD at the outset. I think what we did is to make it more, to demystify it for sure, which is what I hear you talking about when you talk about an actual campaign to sort of shed light on what the program actually is. But it was also just to come into consciousness that we're really kind of between a rock and a hard place, and the federal government hasn't left us with any alternatives. I still think that no one, if there's an option to fund Section 9 more heavily, I think everybody's going to want that option instead. But I think what we've come to understand about RAD and about this process is that the most important thing, the two most important things are education, which is what you're getting at, and self-determination, right? And that's what the residents are getting at here. That what was unique about this process is that we tried to build in self-determination at every step of the process. And I think that combined with your idea for messaging around RAD would be a winning strategy. And I think it's why NYCHA was so careful in the negotiations with us, because they didn't want to do anything that they didn't feel they'd be able to replicate anywhere else, because they knew that once we did this, the pressure was going to be on them to replicate it in these other developments.
Although we never said we were a model, we're just trying to fix it for Chelsea. If they want to use it, they can use it anywhere they want.
Right.
Let's go to any other members of the committee before we go to the public. Yes, Paul.
There we go. Yes, I thought I heard in passing a specific reference to the heating systems in the building. I may be imagining it. Did I hear something about not just repairing but also replacing? If I did hear that right, what does that mean? That's a rather huge.
The current heating systems run off Con Ed steam on mains coming from the street. The buildings are all interconnected, and if one building goes down, sometimes, Miguel, what, 3 buildings go down, correct?
I'll give you better, Joe. Chelsea Market and Con Edison had to shut our heat and hot water off yesterday for 12 hours because they had to replace something at Chelsea Market.
Jeez.
There you go.
Well, I thought I heard something. I'm just wondering, Joe.
So what will happen, Paul?
Yeah.
There will be one new heating system in each and every building.
Cool.
All new piping throughout, and highly efficient heating systems. The ones that are there are state-of-the-art 1950. We're going to move it to at least 2022.
Excellent. And for the new stuff, anything green happening? Any boastful?
Everything. The entire project has to be green because using city and federal funds, you have requirements for green.
Marvelous. Thank you,
Katie.
Thanks. I remembered my last question. So I just had a question about the timing of repairs. I know on one of the last slides we saw, it said that the repairs would start in 2022. But we've obviously heard stories about all of the repairs that are needed now. And I'm just wondering, how are the repairs now being taken care of and paid for?
Okay, it is the normal NYCHA process. Let me just say it. It's horrible, horrible, and horrible. We're not talking about repairs. In 2022, we're talking about major capital improvements.
Yeah.
Take it away, Miguel.
Katie, we have an outage in 2 buildings right now with no gas. That's going to take up to 6 months to fix.
Awful. Yeah. So I guess, I so applaud, all of the community involvement and everything, but obviously that adds to the time it takes to finalize the plans. And I'm just thinking there must be people in some of these buildings who are just frantic to have real fixes done soon, as opposed to just these terrible, slow Band-Aids.
But even
What about
after
the hot water as well? We've not had hot water here for days. Okay, right as I speak, there's no hot water.
But I think to note the massive nature of this, even with the selection process happening as part of it, then there's the Department of Buildings filing, the review. I mean, we're looking at doing work that has not been done for almost 70 years. So that's why it's going to take quite some time.
And remember, the federal government for decades has not given any money to public housing throughout the United States, not only NYCHA.
So we're going to go to the public now. And can you bring over Nellie Mary McGee and Leslie Bogosian Murphy? Mary, are you there yet?
Hi.
Hi
Can
there.
you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. Thank you for having this meeting. I have a few questions. My name is Mary McGee.
Tell people who you are.
My name is Mary McGee. I'm a resident of Fulton Houses. I was also a member of the working group. I am also one of the people who protested against this whole thing. Am I a fan of Red Pact? No. My arm is twisted. I know there's a desperate need for funding for NYCHA. Would I go Red Pact, NYCHA's blueprint? No. I would be out there fighting with signs all over the buildings, windows, and everything. Will I accept Red Pact the way the working group designed it? Yes. For the simple fact is our rights and protections are there. There are no other developments that have the protections that we will have. So one of my questions is, where in the RFP will the residents' rights be listed? It's crucial that this is there. The other thing is I received the booklet as well that they sent out to everybody, all of the NYCHA residents. A lot of people can't comprehend what they're getting. They just don't understand it. You could send it to 1 million people and maybe a quarter of them will understand what you're sending to them. So they do have a lot of questions. As for the virtual resident meetings, those 2 dates they have stated there for the Zoom meetings, why isn't NYCHA requiring its residents to register for these meetings? So this way we know exactly how many residents are attending the meetings and what developments they're from. Because I know from the other meetings, we had residents from other developments asking questions in our Zoom meetings, but we don't have answers for them because their developments are totally different from ours. So
other developments outside of Chelsea.
Outside of Chelsea, yes, in the Bronx, other boroughs. We had one from the Bronx, Edenwald, I believe. I think it's crucial that we don't just send information, but we give them information that they can comprehend, that they can understand. I feel that I want to see in the RFP our residents' rights in there. It's sealed. I mean, it's crucial. The protections that we're getting, the understandings that we worked as a working group so hard to implement need to be in this RFP. If it's not in there, then all the work that we did, those 18 months, it's thrown away. We need to ensure that not only residents are in this RFP, but a few key members of the working group are involved in creating the RFP as well. Community Board 4, Legal Aid Society, ensure that what we fought for as residents, as a community, and as a working group is in there. And, that's just, I guess, it is what it is, but we need to make sure it's done correctly and that we are heard.
Thank you, Mary. And what we'll do tonight is we're taking notes in this meeting. And as part of the community board support, we'll ask these questions. Leslie, you're up next.
Thank you, guys. Add me to the chorus of what a remarkable job. But you've heard it a million times, right, before. Understanding this is a once in a lifetime build and opportunity. And I know it was like kind of blipped over. I think Paul mentioned it. I just want to know, what are the attempts and wording included in the RFP for sustainable environmental provisions? Just understanding that, a commitment now to those green energies will save tremendous money down the road, and not to mention the health of the residents. I just want to know, I know you said, yes, everything will be green, but there are specific, is there any thought for that for the RFP?
Leslie, there is. There's a huge section in there now. And it was just added to today to add some solar power, consistent with NYCHA's. Well, you're laughing, Miguel, right?
Yeah, because just to correct you, Mike, it was just suggesting, it wasn't added.
No.
NYCHA wait, Mike. NYCHA responded they have to look into it if it could be put into this proposal. I don't want to false pretense to people telling them that solar power is going to be added to this. It just was a suggestion that Hector made. NYCHA said it may not even be part of it because there's only certain developments that have that in there.
You're right. That's what I meant to say. It's there if it can be done, right? Part of the RFP is what I'm saying.
So
I think though,
I don't know if there could be a push for that, Joe.
Right. We need to ask. We need to articulate and ask the questions tonight, just specifically to what degree will sustainability be required versus things that are preferred.
Exactly.
So for example, Leslie, at the very end of this whole process, the new flood regulations came out that affected West Chelsea. And the working group report had to be modified to incorporate a whole series of recommendations about those flood requirements. And those did make it in. That's this very specific green thing, planning for climate change going forward. But I think we should ask the specific questions. What is the sustainability plan? What is green? What's required versus preferred? And that's a good issue for the community board to ask of NYCHA during this process. It's a key thing that's going to, the world is changing. So we have to come up with it. Leslie?
Thank you, guys.
Can you bring over Nellie Marnie Halassa, followed by Christine Berthet? Marnie, you're up.
Okay, hello. Hi, everybody. My question is, how are NYCHA tenant protections going to follow the tenants when there's a giant loophole in both the federal monitor agreement and the mold court settlement, which explicitly says that when a development goes through RAD, that oversight by the federal monitor and the court is terminated. So my question is, how will tenants be protected?
I'll speak to that first, then have someone pick up on it, because we specifically in the working group asked for those things to follow. And Robert, go ahead.
So I think when it comes to these, this is, as I'm sure Marnie is, I'm sure you're familiar, the whether or not that is actually the case is currently being litigated, right? It's currently in the courts as to whether or not those judgments will continue to include RAD properties or not. A key piece to remember as part of this, though, is that the end goals of those lawsuits, which is to get the repairs and to force NYCHA to fix the underlying conditions that cause those things to begin with, are actually also the goal here of RAD and are legally mandated as part of the RAD process from HUD through the RAD notice that governs all of the agreements between NYCHA and any future developers. And so those protections are actually enshrined in through that way in order to get those repairs. But whether or not they will continue to have the oversight of the court is a question that is being litigated. And we didn't want to, I think, hold up everything as that is, because that's a decision that's going to be much larger than this working group or any single conversion process.
Okay, so, and just to let people know that in Brooklyn, I've been over at NYCHA's Independence Towers, and they've converted to RAD. And there's a whole host of problems. The private developer hired non-union labor. They're not fixing it. The workers hadn't been paid since December. So things are not fixed. There's half construction. The apartments are half not being fully fixed. And also,
like work was stopped in the middle,
work was stopped in the middle. Thank you. Right. Yes. And also at 344 East 28th Street, also a conversion of RAD. If you go to Fight for NYCHA, their Twitter, it's at Fight for NYCHA. You'll see just the recent tweet was somebody has a huge hole in their ceiling. So, and this is also after the RAD conversion has happened. So, this idea that, the developer, tenant protections follow everybody. The developer is going to be like an angel and fix all the repairs. That's actually not happening now. And if you look for it on Twitter, you'll see. So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention that, the plan might sound good, but in practice might be a different story. Thank you.
I'm actually glad you did, because one of the things in the tenant engagement sessions that we had back in December, I was the person who over and over said, this is going to be no bed of roses. This is going to be renovation with people living in place. It's going to be a mess. It's going to be horrible. Things are going to go wrong. There's going to be leaks. There's going to be problems. But additionally, I want to note the difference in those developments. They do not have an ongoing participation of the resident associations and the tenants in the process. And we are hoping the fact that there's access from the tenants directly to the developer, to the construction people, and to our broader community. The tenants are not handling this alone. They are truly part of the process. Pick up on that, Miguel, and then we'll go to the next question.
I wanted to say one thing about the federal monitor and the lead and the mold situation that NYCHA is dealing with in all the developments. They're actually on site for the past couple of weeks because of the federal monitor, checking every single apartment for lead or asbestos or any mold today. And then on the resident participation, we have a pretty strong resident association. We have pretty strong advocates that live at Fulton and Elliott-Chelsea that are going to try our best to make sure that we're going to be from the beginning to the very end of our lives to make sure that everything is done correctly here.
No, I
just
just
not going to say there's going to be problems and it's going to be difficult. That's given.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the tenant president at 344 East 28th Street, her name is Melanie Ocello. She's a very strong TA president. She has strong residents also, and it's still happening. So I just want.
But is she actually part of the process? But
she's actually, yeah, she's trying to be, but she's being shut out.
Right, but I'm saying the difference here is written in the RFP and the agreements with the developer, the resident associations are legally part of this process, pre-development, construction, and afterward. And I think that is our biggest accomplishment. It does not mean there's not going to be problems. I'm going to guarantee everyone in this meeting, I'm going to guarantee you there will be problems. But how we know about them and having the folks directly involved with them legally engaged, that's an important thing.
And the RFP proposal is going to be coming out shortly. And Marty, you could see the participation that the residents and the RAs will be taking place here.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I think Marnie and I mean, I come from an organizing background, and that's kind of what I tried to bring to this process. Marnie, I'd like to reframe kind of what Joe said a little bit in a different way. We have gotten the structure in place to where now in these 2 developments, or in these 4 developments, depending on how you look at it, it's an organizing challenge. No, it is, we have cleared the structural impediments that have made the development that you cited in the East 20s such a problem, because she was boxed out from the get-go. we have made those structural issues, we've cleared them out of the way so that now it becomes an organizing challenge for the residents to organize themselves and continue to demonstrate their power. We've cleared those structural impediments, and we hope that it sets an example for NYCHA to do the same voluntarily in other places, because we see what's happening in the places that you cited, and that's not acceptable anymore. And so that's how I'd like to reframe it. It's an organizing challenge once we get these structural impediments out of the way.
And I want to go back to Mary's question, and please can one of the members answer the issue about where the resident rights get embodied in the RFP. Robert, maybe, or Chris?
I mean, I can take a stab at it. I personally think that any team that applies to the RFP, I think they need to have demonstrated a commitment to uphold the principles that are contained within the working group report. And I think you all as residents should be pushing for that to be some form of a question of an evaluation mechanism on the RFP. I think they need to affirm the principles that the resident-led working group laid out, and that includes the resident rights and protections.
It's all in there, Chris.
I'm open to other ideas about how to do that, but it seems to me
Robert.
Hi. So I think if you, when you get to the report, there are the range of resident protections. They come in a bunch of different places. So some are things that need to be enshrined in an RFP about commitments to do engagement, follow-up, things that management is going to agree as part of the final closing document to follow or not to follow. And that's part of the contract that they've set. Others, though, are baked in a different way. And so some of them are, a lot of them are actually baked into the lease. And one of the things that actually happened during this process when we had sort of a gap in time between March 2020 and September when we started was that NYCHA had actually started to incorporate some of our recommendations already into their citywide pact lease that they are sort of using here, but also everywhere. And so actually some of the folks who have already gone through rad conversions have already gotten some of the pieces that we had worked on and negotiated with NYCHA echoed out already. There are more that we are continuing to push for and ask for as part of this process. But those are things. And then some of them also do actually require permission from HUD to get. And so part of what the report is doing is we're actually saying that we are working with NYCHA to go to HUD and get permission to enact them as resident rights. And that's a process that we are collaborating with. And folks, I don't know if I mentioned at the beginning, so I work for Congressman Jerry Nadler, and our office is actually helping to partner with HUD, partner with NYCHA to work collaboratively to build support across the congressional delegation so that we can approach HUD from a point of strength and try to get these resident protections granted from the HUD level so that NYCHA can bring them down, and then NYCHA can give them out to everyone, shared across all of PAC developments. That's particularly actually with the rent cap one is one of the ones that we need HUD's permission on. But NYCHA is actively working with us on doing that.
Next member of the public is Board Member Christine Berthet.
Yes, just amazing, very, very, very impressive and very fundamental work for the whole city. As far as the rights of the tenants, I mean, it seems that, I didn't read the report, but it seems that if there was a structure with a board, with a number of, seats on the board, and that the tenants had a number of seats and NYCHA had some seats, and then the developer had some seats. And then that would maybe create the framework for an active and participation by the tenant association rather than a passive one where you have rights and you have to sue in order to get your rights going. So maybe you want to think about that. This is what board of ownership, but that they would agree that so many tenants of the board sit on the board, and they listen to the financial issues and the prioritization of repairs, and people can raise that, and then NYCHA is there, and then if it doesn't work, then it's right there,
Thank you,
Joe,
Christine.
I-
That's
Yeah.
very helpful.
Christine,
I had one other question. I'm sorry. I had one other question. I didn't understand how the 280 million or whatever at the beginning was created. You had the construction is 81 million, and there was a big section which has RAD, and you explained that there was a mortgage, and I didn't understand how that worked.
Sure. It's 263 million.
Right.
And today, public housing by law cannot have a mortgage on the property. By creating the structure with RAD and moving it to Section 8, public housing is Section 9 with subsidies. Section 8 is another kind of subsidy. That enables a private and or not-for-profit owner, in this case, leasing the buildings, to both seek investors in a project and to take out a mortgage from a consortium of banks. That's where the money comes from, both their own investment and mortgages from banks now that they're in Section 8, which permits mortgages to be put on the property.
Got it.
Christine, one of the things we did mention about being part of the board going forward, we also are requesting that the new developer that comes in hire residents from Fulton and Elliott-Chelsea to be part of property management, so we can oversee the process in the future after this is completed.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a conflict. But if you had the representative, the RAs, etc., sitting on the board, then you'd have a different discussion. But that's good. That's good to know. Thanks.
So we have no other questions from the public, Nellie, correct?
No, no one else.
Okay, so I'm gonna do a quick list and then Dolores, if you can sum it up after I do it, if I missed anything. Hold on, somebody tried to speak. Oh, Maria. Maria, are you having problems? Can you speak?
A little bit. I'm in a part of the house that doesn't. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just saying that I think that, I don't know how well you can see me, but I think that this was incredible. And Joe, because, I speak to you, I know about how the process and all the work that went into this. So I just think it's incredible. And the thing that's most important to me is the fact that the tenants were part of the process and get to be a part of the process moving forward. I think that's really the most important thing.
Thank you, Maria.
I'm going to turn off my sound. As you can hear, there's a lot going on back here.
So I'll go through and then Dolores will sum up. The questions that came out of the meeting tonight were where are the resident rights really embodied in the RFP and what is the enforcement mechanism? That where we want to know what the green plan is and sustainability for this overall development and how that gets embodied in RFP. By the way, in all housing that HPD does, it is now a requirement. So that's why we should ask the question because NYCHA is not in the same mode yet. And then what documents will hold the commitments for both resident engagement and the tenant rights? We need to know that because they should be in the RFP that goes out. Anyone who responds must know here are the types of documents that must be used. And then the last part is how to create a structure for ongoing participation in a way that gets very formal. Is there a council? Is it embodied as part of the RFP that this group must be set up to advise and to connect so it becomes very formal? Those are the things that I picked up from the broader committee. Dolores, take it away.
I believe that we also wanted to speak to expanding the engagement and finding a way to simplify the message, is particularly to the senior members of the community so that they can understand and participate fully. And on that, I would make a motion for all of those items that you mentioned and including the additional focus on engagement, especially in these upcoming meetings that are being held with NYCHA.
So that would be a motion to support the findings in the report with these various concerns. They're less conditions, but more concerns. Some are conditions. Does that make sense to everybody in the general idea? From the committee members, I get a yes, a nod or something? Okay.
Yes.
So now that's a formal motion. I'd like to call that motion to a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. All those present and eligible to vote? All those abstaining? Okay, it passes unanimously. I want to thank all of the members of Fulton and from Senator Jackson's office, Chris and Robert Atterbury on this. We've been on a long road together. We really appreciate the work that you've all done to pull this together. And thank you very much. So I'm going to make one more announcement, and Nellie will put this out again. There is a major vaccine event, this time in Hell's Kitchen, Friday, April 9th at Hartley House from 10 a.m. until 3:30. And it is the J&J vaccine. So it's one shot. It is Clinton Housing. Oh, she's got it up there. Great. Clinton Housing in connection with Hudson Guild and Hartley House and the Ryan Chelsea Clinton Health Center are doing this vaccination session. So there's a flyer that's posted. Please bring it broadly to your friends. We've had to change the flyer 3 times because, of course, the age went down since it was issued on Friday, and it is now 30 and older. So it's got a pretty broad range. Please put this out to your friends, and we have 300 slots available. Given that, a motion to adjourn
Motion to adjourn.
from Dolores. All those in favor, please say good night. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for
Good
a
night.
special meeting.
Thank you, everybody.
Right.
Good night.